And this was developed to explicitly deal with the issue of how priorities are set, i.e., they're being set around a small table with a small number of people, as I've already mentioned. And what Chinnery does is it transparently gathers opinions of many experts on research options. But what it does is it defines experts in a very broad way, so including people working, at all different levels, including people with lived experience of various forms of violence, including survivors' voices, and it prevents a few individuals from dominating a process of setting research priorities. So everybody's ranking is equal. My ranking is not higher than anybody else's ranking, and it doesn't really matter who you are as long as you've participated in the process. As an organization that is really committed to learning and innovation, we took this methodology and then we adapted it for the field. And one of the big ways we've adapted, and it is important to mention this, is we have a bunch of advisory groups across all our research priority settings. We have the key stewardship group that drives the process. We have a much broader advisory group. And then we have a huge network of people who we gather on from around the world to actually work. And usually the process reaches out to 400 to 500 people. So that's sort of important to know. We've also made a number of other adaptations based on what we heard coming from the field. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain those through talking about the African Shared Research Agenda, which I'm hoping is the most exciting one for people in this room. So the process that we went through for this, and the process that in fact, this is a very, very similar process to all of our priority setting processes, is that we do a 6-step, very participatory, multiple feedback loop type process. The first step is a review of the literature to identify what are the key gaps. So we review the literature over, say, the period of the last 10 years. We identify what the key gaps are, and that also shows us which categories these key gaps fall under. So in this case, we have 5 different, we call them domains, you can call them categories or whatever: understanding GBV, GBV prevention, GBV response, sorry, working on GBV prevention at scale, and then finally on methods and methodology. And then this process is done through, then we have a question gathering process under each of these domains that goes out to our advisory group, and we have lots of focus discussions, we have meetings, we have online surveys, and a whole bunch of questions come in under these different domains by people who work in the field. The questions then generated are cleaned, they're consolidated, the duplicates are removed, and they're put into the 5 different categories. We have 10 different questions. This is what happened for ASRA, the African Shared Research Agenda. And then these questions then go out in a series of, it's an online ranking survey, but in multiple languages. So in Africa, we did Portuguese, we did Swahili, we did French, we did English, we did Arabic, and the ranking survey then gets distributed to hundreds of people. Now, in fact, so ASRA was launched last year. We have a report in multiple languages, executive summaries in multiple languages, and anyone who are interested can easily access all of this information. One of the important things that I really want to highlight about what we did in ASRA, and again, it's about connecting this process and why it matters, how we are getting the voices we need to get. We added a bunch of qualitative methodologies basically here, because we had heard that certain groups were not actually answering the survey. So when we started analyzing data, we were like, okay, who's missing here? It's not just going to work if we carry on putting out the survey for another month. There are certain groups we are not accessing. So again, through our networks, we identified that LGBTIQ plus groups were not answering numbers, women and girls living with HIV were not answering, women and girls with disabilities were not answering, countries were not answering to the extent we wanted them to. So we held a focus group discussions where people did not want to be in focus group discussions. We did key informant interviews. And what we did, we said, look, forget about coming up with the perfect research question. We know that that's like, a thing that everybody doesn't like to do. But if there was one question that for your community, your group, your own life, you could answer, and you knew that that question being answered would make a difference in the field of violence against your community, what would that question be? And that's how we gathered a bunch of other questions from these qualitative processes, which were then put into the eventual data. Okay, I'm going to skip this because it's not very interesting, but just to say we used criteria, answerability, applicability, maximum potential impact, rather than a scoring system, because again, from the Global Shared Research Agenda, we had feedback that said the scoring system is too complicated. We are not enjoying the way this survey has gone out. So we adapted it so that people, so that people found it easier and so that people could rank kind of physically. I will skip this, but if you have questions on regional representation, please do ask me, because I mean, I would love to talk about this in more detail, but 10 minutes is actually almost impossible to explain research priority setting in. These were the top questions per domain that came up. So I've just given you questions per domain here. There is so much to say about the African Shared Research Agenda. So for those who are interested, please look at the full report. It provides the top 10 questions overall. It provides the top 5 questions per domain, and it analyzes the differences in rankings across populations, group, sector, region, area of professional expertise, all of that stuff. The emerging themes that you can see already just in the top 1 question per domain or category are that there was a strong emphasis on research and interventions that focus on marginalized populations, those that address social norms and preventative programs that address social norms. There was a lot of emphasis on research needed that engages local indigenous structures and local forms of knowledge in GBV prevention and response, and that includes engaging with traditional leaders and faith leaders. And I just want to also highlight that in other processes, we have seen commonalities like this. So in the TF-GBV process, we saw a big emphasis on missing gaps on specific marginalized groups, the whole issue of social norms and changing social norms, and all types of different types of prevention programs also came up in that process and have come up in all our other processes. So we can see that these are quite real. I'm on my last slide. Just overall key reflections and learnings. There, we had widespread agreement among people who participated across all 5 domains, especially on the top 3 ranked questions across those. I've already said the next point. I think this was also very apparent to us. We need to be flexible in adapting the process as it develops. So as I said, when we realized certain groups were not engaging, we changed the process, we extended the timelines, we did what we had to do. Using mixed methods really does ensure meaningful participation. And now we're going to adapt all our processes in this way when we feel it's needed. And finally, this point of, although it was an inclusive and democratic process, we still find that prioritization exercises can be biased. There can be things where people, have a specific bias, or they've heard about specific evidence and they create questions or they rank questions that's based on stuff they've already heard. And then we have to go back and check against the existing evidence that's in the field and say, actually, we already have evidence on this. So this is therefore not a gap. And we need to be very aware of that. So as we're working to analyze and disseminate the data, we need to be very aware of that. And just one key point there is, some of us, the organizations involved in all of this, and I should say it's organizations like UN Women have partnered with us. I don't think I said that, but on the African Shared Research Agenda, the UN Women Southern, Eastern, West, and Central African regional offices participated very strongly in this. They were our key partners in this process. So it's up to all of us to make sure that the existing evidence on effective approaches is being disseminated and is reaching groups everywhere, is reaching groups in accessible ways, so that we are disseminating. And I think we spoke about this yesterday, literally last 1 minute. Across the continent, there is a growing set of commitments by the African Union member states and non-state actors to contribute to preventing GBV. And we heard about this yesterday, right? We also heard how progress really still remains slow, and we need to work out how to build pace on it. We really believe that evidence building on how to prevent GBV is essential for accelerating progress and accountability to women and girls in all their diversity. And that will create the provision of better, more effective programs. Please contact me for more information. There's huge amounts of stuff available on the website, and I'm happy to talk about research priority setting with all of you at any time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did I go much over time?
Thank you so much for that. That was very insightful, Dr. Aisha. I'm assuming Dr. Aisha. Or is it in the pipeline?
No, not doctor.
Okay, maybe we should organize the honorary award.
That's a brilliant idea.
For sure.
I've been advocating for that for ages.
At least now we know what to set as a priority up next.
Exactly.
Well, next we've got Kamva Malumbe, who is the partner at Maxim Attorneys and Associates in Malawi. They'll be covering the civil litigation and attainable justice for victims for gender-based violence.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Kumvana Tukule, not Kamva.
Oh my goodness. Okay, hold on. Let me say that correctly.
Yes.
Please repeat it one more time.
Kumvana.
Kumvana.
Yes, it
Oh my
literally
goodness.
means understanding each other.
Yes, kumvana. Oh yes, in Zulu, ukuzwana, ukuvana in Xhosa. Okay, kumvana. Thank you for that.
The partner at Matchson and Arnold Associates, a law firm in Malawi. I'm also the president of the Women Lawyers Association in the southern part of Malawi and the chairperson of the Gender, Disability and Child Rights Division Practice of the Malawi Law Society. So today I've got something else different than what we've been discussing. I'm bringing you something that is very different from what you're used to when you're dealing with GBV. I'm talking about civil litigation as an attainable justice for GBV victims. So when we have GBV victims, most of the things that we know, like as a response, I know we're talking about prevention, but if we have good response, it is a deterrent and it becomes a good prevention. So in my working and also research in GBV, I found out that the most common response that we use is criminal justice. Do victims know that that's not the only option? Do we people who work with GBV victims know that criminal justice is not the only option? So that's what we're talking about today. So most of the times you find that the perpetrator has not been found guilty, is innocent, and is gotten away. But does that mean that somebody cannot go and sue in civil litigation? So the answer is yes. Even though a perpetrator has not been found guilty in criminal law, the victim can still go and pursue civil litigation and find the perpetrator liable, not guilty, but liable. So it is possible that even after somebody has been convicted, a civil litigation to follow that criminal litigation. So the fact that somebody has been incarcerated because he's been beating up her husband or her wife or his wife does not mean that the victim cannot seek further remedies apart from the arrest. So the criminal approach, when we're talking about victim-centered approach, I'm sure that's something we've been talking about for the last 2 years or 1 year. What is a victim-centered approach? So when we're looking at the criminal approach, the criminal approach tends to look at protecting the victim and the survivor from harm. There should not be re-traumatization. And there's a victim-centered investigations. They're investigating, making sure that the victim is protected. But when we look at the civil approach, we let the victim define what is justice to them. So justice to them is different for everyone. So one can say that my justice, I just want maintenance. I want orders. I don't want him arrested. Some can say, I want orders, plus he should be arrested. And some just say, I want a divorce. We haven't been married. We've been staying together for 15 years, no marriage. What can I get out of this? Can I get property? Can I get maintenance orders? That's justice to me. I don't want him arrested.
Sure.
Or I don't want her arrested. We have female perpetrators as well.
Yes.
So the GBV in domestic settings is quite different than in public settings. If I do slap her, she's not going to run to the police. She's getting a lawyer and I'll be sued for assault. She's not even thinking about the police that Kumfana has slapped me. She wants damages, right? For harassment, I've harassed her, traumatization in front of everyone, and assault just for a slap. she's seeking damages for 3 things, but in domestic setting, if she was my partner and I slap her, she's not gonna think about that. So do we normalize GBV in domestic as it's not assault? It's just assault. It's just a slap that we need to sit down and discuss, or we need to put you together and scare you with arrest. So find that the criminal approach, I'm not saying it's bad, don't get me wrong there, right? I'm just saying there's another option. So it's more cautious, and they don't want to disturb the domestic setting. Are you sure? How long have you been with your husband? Have he slapped you before? In 10 years, he slapped you once, and you want us to arrest him? So more cautious to protect the domestic setting. And that leads to dropping of charges. A woman will drop charges not because she wants to drop charges, but she is pressurized. She's pressurized by the society, she's pressurized by her family, she's pressurized, most importantly, by religious leaders who think the husband is just demonized. We can pray for him, and he'll be fine. With a little of Holy Spirit with everyone will be fine. So they'll go for prayers to make sure that the Holy Spirit is in the house, so nobody beats anybody. So they'll definitely drop charges. If she goes ahead, that means she has not listened to the religious leader. She doesn't have faith in God. So it leads that the convictions in criminal approach, they are only after a serious injury has occurred. Unfortunately, death most times. You've killed your wife, we'll arrest you. You've killed your husband, we'll arrest you. Although the signs and the evidence that this was going to happen was there. But because the criminal approach is very cautious, unless you press charges, they're not going to do anything. So it takes a victim who is not sure about what she needs to do next. She's very uncomfortable in her own shoes. She's scared, and we're expecting her to go and press charges, which is rarely the case. She needs psychosocial support, not going to press charges. So that makes that the criminal approach, although it's there, but then its response to GBV, especially the victim, is rarely what the victim needs. It is what the state needs. The state needs to protect its victims, its citizens. It does that, but the citizen is also an individual with needs of justice. Has it responded to the needs of the justice? In civil approach, like I said, the victim defines what is justice to them. I want protection order, I want maintenance order. Mostly in African countries, local women, they'll stay in abusive relationships because of the maintenance. They have kids, they don't know what to feed the kids when they leave, they don't have a home, they invested too much with the relationship, they don't know if they're going to get something out of the relationship. So they'll stay hoping they will change. But with a civil approach, the person can get what they need to get and make sure they get the justice they need. So should we look for a broader approach than the criminal approach only? I'm not saying we should choose civil, but could we do both? So when we look at criminal approach, it's just a little number that is reported, and out of the little number, it's just also a fraction that gets prosecution. And after a serious injury has occurred or somebody has lost life. So, UN Rapporteur, Ms. Ladika Komarasmwe, advocated when she was a UN Rapporteur that we need to look at GBV differently. We need to look at domestic violence as a serious human rights violation. And according to the international law, every human rights violation requires a reparation. It requires a remedy. So if we look at news on the BBC or whatever news we watch, every human rights violation, people are looking out for remedies. They're looking out for reparations. It's only in domestic violence that we're not looking for remedies. We're not looking for reparations to repair the violation that has happened. I don't know why we do that, but we've been doing that so far. So the violation that happens because of domestic violence, for some reason, does not require remedies. We just need to arrest the perpetrator. So should we say, is the criminal justice failing GBV victims? Maybe yes, maybe not. The criminal approach does what the state wants it to do, protect the citizens, but not provide reparations or remedy for the violence suffered. There are challenges with civil litigation. I looked at that, but I'll come back later. So another way of dealing with, perhaps I should deal with challenges first, and we deal with that, sorry. So the challenges of civil litigation of GBV that are well known to us, mostly is the access to lawyers by survivors. Most lawyers are expensive. They will charge you for your suffering. So the first challenge is the knowledge of option. That should I take civil or criminal? What if somebody can afford civil? Should that option not be made to them? Should we assume civil is unreachable for everyone? Should everyone just go for criminal? Then the perpetrators, of course, having not enough money to pay for damages. That's another challenge with civil. But what if he can afford? And what if he can afford everything? Should we not make that option available for the victim? And there's also an unwillingness, I'm sorry, by private lawyers to take GBV cases because victims change their mind. You're in court and they've changed their mind. I'm no longer coming. We have reconciled. And you're there with your files just alone. So for this, there's a way that you engage private lawyers to understand GBV victims, that the reason they change their mind is because they're not happy with the violations that they're suffering. But perhaps you have not made clear to them the remedies that they'll get out of this, or the reparation that they'll get with this. So there's a lack of collaborations between us CSOs, the law societies, and the lawyers. The lawyers don't have cases of GBV mostly to them. Most CEOs, CSOs don't approach lawyers. For example, there's a lady that came to my office. She just said, I run a CSO and I need a lawyer to do cases for me. I'm like, you can't pay, surely? I said, yes, but I need somebody because we can't just do these cases. And we're doing that, one of that cases, which is very sad case, which is leading to a strategic litigation of GBV. That case, when I was dealing with it, it just exposed a lot of discrimination between the poor victims and the rich victims and the access to justice. So if this woman did not come to say, I run a CSO, I've got a lot of victims, but the criminal approach is failing me. What else can I do? I'll also just be sitting in the office that everything is okay, everybody's happy. But through this case, we found out that no, there's a lot that is going on, and we can do a lot about it. So there's strategic litigation of GBV, which is also mostly civil. We seek remedies when we're doing strategic litigation. When we're talking about strategic litigation, we're not talking about just getting reparation for one person, but you think about people of her situation across the country or across the community. So you want to deal with the situation once and for all. So you're going to help one person, but then you're addressing an issue that is cross-cutting.
Yes, thank you.
So when we're doing strategic litigation, we do not sue the victim. If we do, it's a second defendant, but the first defendant is the state because of state obligations. Why do we sue the state? It's because most states in Africa, they signed the CEDAW. And then we just don't sign for decorations. If you sign, you're saying, yes, I'm committed to this. You have obligations, and we have to take you to task for obligations. So the state has an obligation in, according to General Recommendation number 35 of CEDAW, when we're talking about GBV, due diligence to prevent, investigate, prosecute, and provide reparations, which they don't. They just end at investigation most times and prosecutions. So there's two ways of dealing with, there's three ways of dealing with GBV. Not only the criminal approach, there's the civil approach, and also there's the strategic litigation of GBV, which requires you NGOs to form collaborations with law societies and lawyers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kamva. Wait, Kamvana. Kamvana Matukule. Thank you so much for that contribution. I think all of us got a moment to reflect and also learn about the other tools that we have at our disposal in terms of legal defense and in the civil space. Next, we've got Nyarai Moshawiri. Thank you so much for joining us on the platform. They're the founder and executive director of the Justice for Women Foundation and research officer of Judicial Service Commission of Zimbabwe, and they're going to be discussing preventative strategies against gender-based violence in Southern Africa.
Thank you very much, distinguished guests, all protocols observed. Ladies and gentlemen, I extend my profound gratitude to the Ambassador of the Kingdom of Netherlands, Her Excellency Joanne Donwood, the Center for the Study of Violence and Reconciliation, and the supporting stakeholders for giving me this opportunity to address you all, ladies and gentlemen, on an issue that still remains pervasive in our society, which is gender-based violence. Despite significant legal frameworks as indicated, policy initiatives aimed at curbing this crisis, gender-based violence persists, undermining the SADC region's sustainable development goals and progress towards gender equality and social justice. Gender-based violence still remains a pervasive challenge in Southern Africa, deeply rooted in historical, cultural, and socio-economic factors. In our collective efforts to combat gender-based violence, the adoption of international treaties by countries in Southern Africa marks the first significant milestone. For example, CEDAW, the Convention on Elimination on All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, as well as the Istanbul Convention, set the international standard high for the protection of women and girls from violence. Southern African countries have got a duty to implement and align their laws, their constitutions, and their policies to these international treaties towards our fight for gender-based violence. The Southern African Development Community SADC Protocol on Gender and Development 2008 stands as a beacon of hope that aims to reduce and eventually eradicate gender-based violence across the SADC region. It emphasizes the need for comprehensive strategies, ladies and gentlemen, including the development of nation action plans, legal reforms, and establishment of support service for survivors in our different and respective jurisdictions. The SADC protocol underscores the importance of collaboration among member states, calling for the sharing of best practices, the harmonization of laws, the strengthening of regional institutions. This regional approach is vital as gender-based violence does not respect borders. A united front is essential to effectively address this pervasive issue. The philosophy of Ubuntu, ladies and gentlemen, Ubuntu ngumuntu ngabantu. I am because we are. It emphasizes interconnectedness and communal responsibility, offering a framework for combating gender-based violence in Southern Africa. By fostering empathy, respect, and mutual care within communities, Ubuntu encourages collective action against GBV. It challenges harmful gender norms and practices and promotes equality, advocating for a societal shift where violence is collectively condemned and survivors are supported. So integrating Ubuntu into educational and community programs can help prevent GBV by nurturing a culture of dignity, respect, and shared humanity, making violence against an individual intolerable within the community. Ladies and gentlemen, addressing mental health is a preventative strategy. Because mental health issues play a significant role in both the perpetration and the impact of GBV. Perpetrators of GBV often have unresolved psychological issues such as anger management problems, post-trauma, which is and deep-seated beliefs about gender roles, which can contribute to violent behavior. So addressing these issues through mental health interventions can help reduce the risk of violence by altering harmful behaviors and beliefs. For survivors, GBV can have psychological consequences, including depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, and other mental health challenges. Providing mental health for survivors, ladies and gentlemen, is essential to curb GBV. The use of artificial intelligence, AI, and technology to combat gender-based violence. Artificial intelligence is increasingly being leveraged to combat GBV by enhancing prevention, intervention, and support systems. AI can analyze large, vast amounts of data to identify patterns and predict potential instances of violence, allowing authorities and organizations such as the police to intervene proactively. For example, AI algorithms can alter social media and online communications, for example, on Twitter, on Facebook, as well as on Pinterest and TikTok. If you see a report that threatens GBV, you can report that user and they'll be flagged. One of the most significant applications of AI in combating GBV is through natural language processing, which can analyze text and speech for abusive language, identify emotional distress from a user, and provide automated responses or direct users to appropriate resources. There are also now chatbots, which are powered by AI, which offer 24/7 support services, providing users with information on legal rights, safety planning, and connecting them with emergency services. The role of civic organizations, schools, and churches, where we also all come in. While governments and regional bodies play a pivotal role, the fight against gender-based violence cannot be won without the active involvement of civic organizations, schools, and churches, because we are the first-time responders providing essential services to survivors, advocating for policy changes, and raising awareness in communities through our grassroots efforts, which are indispensable in creating a culture of zero tolerance to violence. Schools now are the breeding grounds for the future. Ladies and gentlemen, they hold the power to shape attitudes of people and children, and from the behaviors from their young age. Through a comprehensive sex education awareness programs and the promotion of gender equality, schools can equip young people with the knowledge and skills to challenge harmful stereotypes and build healthy relationships. Churches and other religious institutions, ladies and gentlemen, are the pillars of moral authority in many communities, and they have a role to play to fight gender-based violence. When I go to a pastor, a mfundisi, or bishop, the bishop should not pray for that person and say the Holy Spirit will come and change. Ladies and gentlemen, because they are pushing back the victims to the perpetrators, and it must stop. The empowerment of women and the girl child. The SADC region experiences high levels of gender-based violence driven by deep-rooted patriarchal norms and economic disparities and limited access to education and justice for women. Empowerment initiatives address these issues by enhancing women's autonomy, economic independence, and social standing, thereby reducing their vulnerability to violence. Economic empowerment plays a significant role in this strategy, providing women with access to education, vocational training, financial resources, as well as pushing them towards economic independence. This reduces dependence on the male perpetrators who are their counterparts. As women, we should desist from that circumstance where when your husband or your boyfriend abuses you and then he says, babe, I'm sorry, and buys you a Mercedes. It must stop, ladies and gentlemen. It must stop. Last but not least, the role of monitoring and evaluation as a measuring tool to fight gender-based violence. As we continue to implement these strategies, ladies and gentlemen, it is imperative that we have robust monitoring and evaluation mechanisms in place. Without these, we cannot accurately assess the effectiveness of our efforts or make necessary adjustments. Monitoring allows us to track the progress, identify gaps in our organization, and ensure that resources are being channeled and used efficiently. Evaluation, on the other hand, provides us with the evidence needed to refine our approaches and scale up successful interventions. In Southern Africa, several countries, including Zimbabwe, have made commendable strides in establishing monitoring and evaluation frameworks. However, we must ensure that these systems are not only robust, but inclusive for the marginalized communities, incorporating the voices and experiences of survivors, communities, and civil society. Ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, I can say the fight against gender-based violence, as we discussed in this two-day symposium, requires a multifaceted and coordinated approach. Let us remember that in as much as it is not preventable, ladies and gentlemen, in as much as it is not inevitable, it is very much preventable. By working together, we can create a future where every individual, regardless of their sex, their gender, can live free from violence and from fear. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to Minyarai for that wonderful reflection. I'm seeing an amazing thread from Aisha's contributions, Kamvana's contributions, and yourself, sort of strengthening the same arguments and also moving forward to the next topic of holistic approaches to addressing gender-based violence with Dr. Tamburai Murise. They're the director of the Family Support Trust.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Like has been said, my name is Tamburai Mchinguri. I'm the director of Family Support Trust in Zimbabwe. Basically, Family Support Trust is an organization that prevents and responds to cases of sexual and gender-based violence. And I'm going to present on holistic approaches to gender-based violence. And I think basically what I've just seen is that what we've been discussing over the past 2 years, it's just going to be summarized by my presentation. We have been discussing a lot about response. We've been discussing a lot about prevention. But I think what I've just noticed is that different countries, different organizations are addressing gender-based violence in a piecemeal approach. But how best then can we make sure that we we address gender-based violence in a holistic manner? And basically, I'm going to address 3 issues. If we want to address gender-based violence holistically, we need to prevent it, we need to mitigate against it, and we need to respond to it. What is it that we can actually do in terms of prevention? Simple things like awareness raising that we all normally do. We'll give information and education to people who are not aware of gender-based violence. For example, when we look at the cultural and social norms, the patriarchal practices that people do have and stick to, some people may not know that actually perpetuates gender-based violence. Therefore, when we engage such people, when we give people information on awareness, through awareness, we actually trying to prevent gender-based violence. We need also to conduct situational analysis so that we have the information on gender-based violence, which we can then use to develop evidence-based programming. Engagement of men and boys, I think, was also discussed yesterday, which is very important because we cannot fight gender-based violence. We cannot prevent it without the involvement of men and boys, but also engaging leaders, especially the community leaders, traditional leaders. They are the gatekeepers, they are key custodians of culture, and they are actually also listened to. So if we really want to prevent gender-based violence, we need to take them on board. I'm aware, and I've been told of a case where I think there was Ebola somewhere in West Africa there, and people were trying by all means to give people information, but because it was affecting a lot of big religious organizations and institutions, they actually had to go to the community, to the leaders. And the leaders, because they are listened to, they simply said, guys, if there's somebody who has died of Ebola, you do not have to open the coffin, for example. So that was actually the beginning of how they managed to control the spread of Ebola. So the local leaders, the traditional leaders are very powerful if we really want to prevent gender-based violence. I will then move on to mitigation. I think we also need to reduce the risk of gender-based violence. We need to have early warning signs of gender-based violence and to take measures that in the event that there's likely going to be an outbreak of a situation that may cause gender-based violence, then we need to reduce the risk. For example, I think we were all aware that there was going to be a drought in Southern Africa this year. And the drought was actually going to expose women, especially to gender-based violence. And therefore, we were supposed to take preventative measures as well as try to reduce the risk of exposing women to gender-based violence during this induced drought. Empowerment of women, for example, also reduces the risk of women to gender-based violence. Therefore, we need not wait for something to happen so that we can then reduce our gender-based violence. Unfortunately, of course, it is very difficult to completely do away with the gender-based violence, and we are always likely to get survivors of gender-based violence. Some people being abused sexually, physically, emotionally, and through other different ways. And therefore, we need also to have response mechanisms. But when it comes to response mechanisms, like I said, we want to try as much as possible to make sure that very few women and girls are then exposed to gender-based violence, and then we can provide the response. Again, the response also needed to be holistic and comprehensive. When we do have survivor-friendly clinics, for example, for women and girls, we need to make sure that we provide medical and psychosocial support to these women. We need to respond as quickly as possible to make sure that when somebody visits a clinic, for example, and has been exposed to gender-based violence, they need to get post-exposure prophylaxis within 72 hours. They need to be tested for HIV. They need to be tested for STIs. They need to be tested for pregnancy, and probably be given the necessary prophylaxis and prevention drugs, as well as also to make sure that mentally and psychologically they've been supported. That is, we also need to provide psychosocial support to survivors of gender-based violence. And this could actually be done through the establishment of one-stop centers or one-stop shops, where these survivors do not have to travel from one place to the other seeking services. But also in terms of response, we also need to make sure that our services are decentralized and we've got the necessary capacity and expertise. For example, what we have actually noticed is that in Zimbabwe, the issue of response was sort of centralized with a few civil society organizations offering these services. But then these organizations then engaged the government and made sure that we decentralize the services. For example, Family Support Trust and my sister, the memory, I work with her when she was with, I used to work with her when she was with Ada Rep Clinic. We actually had to train nurses and doctors within government hospitals to make sure that the service is readily available everywhere. Even if it means at a rural clinic, at least these services must be there so that when somebody has been exposed to gender-based violence, then they can be given medical and psychosocial support services. But all these things cannot be done without proper coordination. So I think there's really need to make sure that there are proper coordination mechanisms if we are to prevent, to mitigate, and to provide a response. So I think, like was said yesterday, by the representative from Namibia and from Zimbabwe and other countries as well, we realized that there are structures of coordination that are meant to bring people together and different stakeholders together so that we move in the same direction. However, one of the things that we have noted in the provision of holistic services to survivors of gender-based violence and then addressing or trying to reduce gender-based violence is access to justice. I think, like my sister just said here, there's a serious gap in promoting access to justice for women and girls who have been abused. Like in Zimbabwe, you know that about 25% only of all the survivors that are abused that get services at hospitals access justice. Therefore, I think this is an area that we all need to work on very hard if we are to provide holistic services and address gender-based violence holistically. Thank you.
I was just about ready to call for time. Thank you. You came just in time. Well, we can open up for questions from the floor if anyone wishes to make a statement or something for. Yeah, you can feel free to either come up to the mic and reflect or share something.
Thank you. My name is Advocate Joanna Jonas from Lesotho. I'm Executive Director for Nairasha Legal Support. We are a social enterprise that provides legal aid services to victims and survivors of gender-based violence. I just want to comment to what Mayor Kumvana presented on. And I'm sitting here calling myself out because usually what we drive towards is for survivors and victims to we support them so that they can have perpetrators arrested, support them through prosecution so that there are convictions. We seldom ask what justice would mean for them. So I'd just like to say your presentation has motivated me to be intentional about ensuring that what we provide is what the victim wants. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Yes, you can feel free. I must second that point, that contribution, just reflecting on so many survivors that need those mechanisms as well.
Thank you. My name is Kiteria Girengane from Mozambique, from Women Observatory. I felt really interested on the research approach for setting priorities, considering that I'm running Women Observatory and Women Observatory is leading the Women Barometer, the annual report on states of women, as well as other researches on GBV, and felt more interested because you mentioned Portuguese. and normally Portuguese are not included in this sort of researches. But I would like to understand if you have experience on doing research on GBV in the context of military conflicts. In Mozambique, we are facing terrorism in Cabo Delgado, and one of research fields of interest for us is the current situation of women being forced to exchange sex for humanitarian assistance and military protection under impunity. And if you also works on it, how women in the context of conflict and those who are offline are included in these surveys and focus group for setting priority agenda. My second question or comment is for my sister from Malawi. I think the issue is more complex than civil society organization not approaching lawyers. In the context of Mozambique, we have few pro bono lawyers working with my organizations. And when we approach other lawyers and even the bar, they require funding, saying that it's expensive to support this sort of process. I run a rapid response mechanism that joins together civil society organization at national level, state actors, and other relevant actors. And we try to engage both psychologists and lawyers. But I tell you, pro bono conversation is still challenging in certain contexts. So even though it's challenging, we don't give up. And we are starting to empower paralegals and finally students on law schools so that they can engage and support this sort of process. And I think this is an alternative. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, yeah, you can go next.
Thanks. Morning, everyone. My name is Atini Magota, and I work for CSVR. And I just sort of want to thank Aisha for such a compelling presentation. In raising the question often avoided as to who gets to sort of prioritize research questions. I resonate with this quite strongly because I come from a feminist background, and we are told to sort of interrogate and question every single thing, whether it is epistemology, theorization, and just overall research methods. However, we don't necessarily have the same privilege when it comes to NGOs. Donors tend to be very stringent about research agendas. And so I guess my question is, from your experience, what is your advice just in terms of negotiating those research priorities?
For the contributions, just for the sake of time, we're going to have to move on to the responses. I'm sorry to cut you off, but perhaps, pardon? Oh, there's someone already standing. You see now. Okay, I'll have to be diplomatic. Okay, we'll take yours as the last one, and then we're really cut for time. We're going to have to go to responses. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to register this statement after the presentation from Malawi about the options that the victim has. Options in place for both the victim and perhaps the perpetrator. In South Africa, we do have victim-offender dialogues that are run by correctional services. And in many cases, they're giving all the rights to the perpetrator because it's part of addressing the pillar that speaks to healing, care, and support. And the perpetrator, once they want to come out, they would sign up for the dialogue, simply because it's part of the process for them coming out to the society. And then that meeting, it's kind of unfair because it doesn't allow the community to come and say a word. It's only the perpetrator and his family, and sometimes the family and part of the family from the victim. And depending on the sensitivity of the case, sometimes it's only 3 people or 4. And what pains much is that after these deliberations, the perpetrator has to go to the community. That was not part of the offender dialogue. The community that did not sign up to say the perpetrator can come out, because When the perpetrator is in, it asks the society that has contributed, because we go there in March, we say, no, he must stay there. But when that process comes, the community is not involved. So I just wanted to register that such meetings really need to be opened to everyone. And I'm speaking here, I'm coming from Northern Cape, and I'm a community medical chaplain. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for that contribution. They should be open to everyone. And I think that's a really sort of sweeping statement that's been made from the floor, that we need to see more holistic interventions from Lungiside, from Swaga. And we also perhaps shouldn't be using derogatory words to label women, particularly because majority of them are not perpetrators, but that's a conversation for another forum. I guess let's start with Aisha's question from a member of CSVR, who had a question speaking about the importance and relevance of research, but still needing to have a lens through which we negotiate research priorities, and trying to understand your footing on that. How do you negotiate those priorities?
Priorities that came up. So starting with that one, 100%. I mean, I think the thing that we consider most crucial is there's really no point in doing these research priority setting exercises if they aren't going to be used. And one of the things we struggle with the most is how to ensure that they are used. And not just, by having the odd webinar that people can attend, which we do, by the way, but by actually disseminating these research priorities in ways that are accessible, in ways that people find them relevant to use, for researchers, for non-governmental organizations, for practitioners on the ground, how to use them to evaluate your programs, how do you use them to set your own agendas in terms of when you want questions answered, and how do you use them to advocate with funders. And I think they are a powerful tool. So if people are aware of them, and if, for instance, people in this room can now say, hey, we've heard about the African Shared Research Agenda, we see that through this vast consultative process, our brother and sister organizations from around the continent have suggested that these are very key, this resonates with us in our context, then you can actually use that as a tool to advocate with funders. We're already doing that to whatever extent is possible. People who are partners in the process, like UN Women, are now using the African Shared Research Agenda to actually fund research priorities through the ACT program. I don't know how many of you know about the ACT program, which is funded by UN Women and the EU, and it's funding a lot of work all over the African region. And they are specifically looking at this agenda and going, okay, here are the questions, we're going to put money behind this. So that is happening. So I think the biggest thing I would say is just be aware of it and see how you want to use it. And we can certainly help and assist in creating whatever tools you need to actually to do that, and we want to work much more with practitioners across the continent in terms of making sure this is used. And the question on military conflicts, absolutely, and it's come up in the research priority setting process in ASTRA and in the TF-GBV process and in the global shared research agenda process. GBV in humanitarian context, the specific gaps of knowledge that we have, how crucial it is to answer those questions. It came up a lot in the African Shared Research Agenda process, obviously, because there are many countries on the continent which are in some state of conflict or the other. In terms of reaching women who are directly impacted by conflict, that's obviously quite difficult in terms of making sure that their voices are included in the process. But we do have representatives from non-governmental organizations and other organizations working on the ground in countries that are in conflict and that are in humanitarian contexts. And so we do have that represented. In terms of the question around exploitation and abuse in humanitarian context, there's a lot of work being done on this. I'm very happy to share resources on this issue of women being forced to exchange sex or exchange other things and actually from the very organizations that are meant to be assisting and helping and protecting what is happening. There's a lot of work being done on this. There's lots of work being done on women and GBV in humanitarian context. So please, again, approach me at any time. I mean, I'm very happy for my address to be shared by the organizers with anyone who wants to reach out. So please feel free to approach for more information. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, we had several other questions. I think we can maybe go according to... Yeah, I think you had only one. Yeah. Oh, you didn't have a... Let me see. Mike.
I think I'll just respond to my sister from Mozambique, who on the issue of approaching lawyers for pro bono. First of all, if you approach lawyers for pro bono, they're going to say no, because what you're saying is going to have your time for free for 3 years or 2 years or 1 year. So it's the choice that a pro bono lawyer makes, because they're required only to do 24 hours in most jurisdictions of pro bono. But then you have to be, if you need lawyers in your organization, you have to be intentional about the program that you're doing. And if you want to use civil litigation in your program, so you cannot rely on pro bono. What that means, they'll just offer you the time that they are free, which is maybe 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours per month, which is really not enough. So in your programs, when you're drawing them, I think perhaps you will need a lawyer to be litigating for you. What I found out, the cheaper way of involving a lawyer is doing strategic litigation instead of one-on-one litigation, that you have a lot of clients that a lawyer has to come. It's either if she's pro bono or he's pro bono, he's going to get tired very soon and he'll stop coming. But if it's strategic litigation, it's going to be one case which is going to bring a lot of impact in your organization and in your country. So you see the cases that come to you, and then you choose one case that is really, really going to answer. So you can do this by approaching the law societies, or lawyer who is interested in that kind of work. And you can also, these days, there are a lot of NGOs that are providing strategic litigation. You can partner with them and say that, can we bring you cases of strategic litigation? They'll be happy, because some of the NGOs that are established for strategic litigation, they are required to do a certain number of cases in a year. So they'll be happy to get on to take on your cases. So you just look for the NGOs that you'll be happy to collaborate with. I think collaboration will be an important factor here. But instead of finding one lawyer to do a lot of cases for you, I hope that helps. Thank you.
No, I think just to kind of sort of wrap up the session, I think it would be ideal to sort of get feedback from all the contributing panelists, maybe just like half a minute each, just to close on, I guess, now what is your positioning going forward, and also just taking from the conversations on the floor. They're speaking about more holistic systems being used. They're talking about opening up these response mechanisms to impact not just the victim, but everyone. And what is your take going forward in impacting in the work that you're doing as well? Yeah.
Do you want me to start?
Yes, please.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, look, everything that people have spoken about over the last day and a half completely resonates with me and with the work that we're doing at SVRI. We consider the use of data and evidence as incredibly important. It came up yesterday from Alice saying, how do we make sure that the correct evidence is getting to the correct people so they can use it in these holistic approaches? We consider prevention and response equally important sides of the problem. You cannot do prevention without having response mechanisms in place. You cannot do, or you can do response without having prevention, but we shouldn't be doing that. In terms of the approach around, I mean, it's interesting. It connects to research priority setting exercises. This emphasis on, we need to understand perpetration much better. Of course, we should not just be looking at victims and survivors. We need to understand perpetration, because only by understanding motivations, nuances of experiences, the sort of support that, frankly, perpetrators also need, right? What are the support mechanisms that are needed? Why aren't we talking more about that in order to address some of these problems? That's very much on the agenda. It's very much on all the research agendas. The question keeps coming up: what support services do perpetrators need? What are the motivations? Why don't we understand perpetration as well as we should? So we know that there's a bunch of work that needs to go into that. And again, be very interested to hear about different groups' experiences on this. I mean, overall, I think my message is just, we need evidence-based approaches. We need more evidence. Even though it seems like we have so much evidence done over the decades, we still know that, and I think the doctor here spoke about the do no harm thing. We will do harm if we create interventions and programming that is not based on the evidence. And so that would be a main thing that I would advocate for. Thank you.
Thank you. You can go next.
Okay,
right.
thank you very much. As the commissioner from the Gender Commission yesterday stated, I think our takeaway is to involve the government as well as the civic society and organizations to implement, restructure, and to combat this fight against gender-based violence, as well as monitoring and evaluation, because we can end up with 1 million organizations fighting GBV, but if we are not going back to our regions to trace our progress, ladies and gentlemen, we are not doing anything. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Tambra.
Thank you so much. For me, really, I think what is so important as we move forward is to invest more in prevention. And at the end, reduce the number of women and girls who then experience gender-based violence. Whilst we do need response, but I know that the response is very, very expensive. And at times, even depending on what kind of response we offer and at what stage. If there are any delays, it could actually be fatal to some extent if we do not act as quickly as possible. There's therefore need for all of us really to coordinate, work together, but put more resources and effort in prevention. When it comes to response, please, I think we really need to offer quality response. Because gender-based violence is really serious, and in the long run could result even in death. Therefore, I think as a continent which is resource strained, let's put more effort on prevention. Thank you.
Thank you. Kamvana, please.
For me, I think our take home should be the understanding that gender-based violence, especially domestic violence, is a gross human right violation. And as international law standards, every violation requires a remedy. It requires a reparation. And our reality is that justice is expensive and selective. So how do we get the victims that comes to us to choose their justice, and also to bridge that justice should not be selective to them? Justice should choose them, or they should choose justice, and it should not be expensive. So maybe our approaches going forward should be thinking about bridging that gap, because if we don't bridge that gap, victims will not get justice. Perpetrators will be arrested, but victims will not get justice. Thank you.
Thank you again, Kumvana, and to all the panelists. Your contributions were really valuable, and also from the floor. So for myself, we're about to, I guess, break for tea. We only have 10 minutes. Unfortunately, we had to eat into your time. My apologies. But yeah, enjoy the tea break. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Can we please take our seats? We're looking for Terasai to join us, please. She can use this mic. She doesn't have to be. Okay, good morning, everybody. So we are going to end off the 2-day session, our last panel for the 2 days. That's been very informative, exciting, many takeaways, lots of nuggets, lots to think about. And I think before we start the session, I just want to say, we've listened to a lot of different things, And one of the speakers that stood out for me was yesterday that even though we have all the legislation, and I think it's the same for all the countries in the SADC region, we have every piece of legislation, but the lack of implementation. So this panel is going to speak about lessons, implementation, and some of that. So first we're going to have advocate. I'm sorry, you know, when you're over 50, you need the glasses to see. So we want to, Advocate Joanna Jonas, the Director of Narration Legal Support in Masudi in Lesotho. Thank you, Advocate.
Can't hear myself.
Is she audible?
Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Firstly, I'll start with a disclaimer. I feel like an underachiever because I don't have perfect slides prepared like everyone else. I'm terrible with computers because I'm a lawyer. We write on paper, pen and paper. That's how we work. So I'm just going to give you this presentation. And secondly, I'll just do a brief introduction about the work that I do. As it has been said, my name is Joanna Jonas. I'm founder and director of Nairasha Legal Support. Nairasha is a social legal enterprise based in Lesotho that works in promoting women's rights, providing legal aid services that comprise of legal services and psychosocial support to victims and survivors of gender-based violence. We have women empowerment programs, and yes, thank you. The work that I'm going to present is not our work. It's work that was implemented by other organizations, but I'm honored to present this work. We have been a part of some of their programs and workshops. So I have knowledge of the work that has been done. So I'm going to give a presentation on a multi-stakeholder approach to GBVH in Lesotho, gender-based violence and harassment in the workplace in Lesotho. So now one of the lessons that we can learn from this program in Lesotho is an establishment of an anti-GBVH program by Workers' Rights Consortium. In developing this program, landmark agreements were signed among leading apparel brands, Levi Strauss and Co., the Children's Place and Contour brands, a coalition of Lesotho labor unions and women's rights advocates, Independent Democratic Union of Lesotho, United Textile Employees, to name a few. But so this program was established in partnership with Nenshin factories or garments because, as many people may know, majority of the workforce in Lesotho is comprised of factory workers. And this is where gender-based violence and harassment is more prevalent, because in the factories we have workers that are not really educated. It's mostly illiterate people or people that have not been advanced to higher education. There is a scarcity of jobs, and everyone is just desperate to keep their jobs. So a code of conduct was established to work as the guiding and binding tool for the entire program. The code contains all important definitions of gender-based violence and harassment at the workplace, the parties covered by the program, the scope of application, and penalties for violations. There is no deviation allowed from the code of conduct, and it is the primary framework of this program. The code of conduct also protects freedom of association and prohibits retaliation for complaining about GBVH. So this is how the program adopts a three-dimension approach to tackling gender-based violence and harassment in the workplace. There is an information line. So this information line is a toll-free number set up to receive calls from Nenshin workers. The calls can be from workers seeking information or clarification about the program, reporting a GBVH complaint, retaliation, unfair labor practices, and or denial of freedom of association. The information line also works as a referral for worker complaints. The information line refers all GBVH complaints to WRW, which is Workers' Rights Watch, while other complaints are referred to other institutions, including the WRC, Workers' Rights Consortium, and trade unions, depending on what is being reported. Another dimension of the program is education and awareness. The objective of this component is to educate and raise awareness at Nanxing workers of all, awareness of all Nanxing workers on issues of GBVH at the place of work and how to report incidents of GBVH that takes place at work. This component is implemented primarily by the trade unions and the NGOs. The NGOs that are involved are Federation of Women Lawyers and Federation of Women Lawyers in Lesotho and Women and Law in Southern African Research and Education Trust Lesotho, commonly known as WILSA. So they are the ones that implement in partnership with various trade unions that are involved in the program that implement the education and awareness component of the program. The third component is Workers' Rights Watch that I have mentioned earlier. And this is an independent organization which was formed with the intention of being an investigative body for GBVH complaints from the Nanxing factories workers. Its primary mandate is to investigate GBVH complaints received from the feeder information line, which is the first component that I talked about, and to issue determinations based on the investigations reports. It is also mandated to ensure that Nanxing enforces the determinations issued, and as a monitoring body, it is charged with the responsibility of monitoring GBVH culture change at Nanxing factories. This exercise shall be and is taken annually, and also WRW will generate reports which show statistical GBVH prevalence trend reports. So under the agreement, there is the employer agreement that sets forth the details of the program and enumerates Nanxing nation's obligations, including its obligation to take whatever disciplinary action against abusive managers and supervisors that an independent oversight body deems necessary. The necessary function of the brand agreements, which are the brands that purchase garments that are manufactured at these factories in Lesotho. They are usually United States-based brands or companies. So their essential function is to enforce all the employer agreement. If Nanxing does not comply, as determined by the oversight body, each brand must reduce orders in a manner sufficient to convince Nanxing to return to compliance. The brand agreements also establish the brand's financial obligations and their role in appointing representatives to the oversight committee of the independent body. I will just summarize what the terms of the agreement are so that I don't bore you with with too many details. So this agreement covers 10,000 apparel workers. As I have said, majority of the workforce in Lesotho is comprised of factory workers. So Nanxing is one of the many garment factories, but it is the biggest employer in the factory industry. It covers more than 10,000 apparel workers, the majority of whom are women. And the agreement establishes that any worker who experiences harassment or coercion has the right to file a complaint with the independent monitoring body. I have already elaborated on or I have already highlighted what the monitoring body, which is WRW, is mandated with. Another term is robust anti-retaliation provisions to ensure that complainants and witnesses are protected from further harassment or victimization. And there's an in-depth training program for workers about their rights under the program. And it is mandatory for all workers to undertake the training while their time is also being compensated for. Sorry. There are also strong protections against any interference with or retaliation against workers' exercise of their associational rights. Sorry. Thank you. So another issue that I want to highlight, I only have 2 minutes left, is the enforceability of the agreements. WRW, which was established as an independent nonprofit organization with a mandate to investigate and resolve worker complaints of gender-based violence and harassment at Nensheng in Lesotho, is responsible for enforceability or enforcement of most of the terms of the agreement or program. And since 2021 up to November 2022, we have had 6,000 workers that attended the anti-GBVH training as part of the agreement. And also, I have already talked about the toll-free information line. So once a case of violence or harassment is reported, it is referred to the WRW, and between February 2021 and November 2022, WRW says it concluded investigation into 44 out of 81 individual reports directing disciplinary action against harassers in numerous instances, and in some cases the job termination of perpetrators. So this agreement has strong enforcement mechanisms to ensure that the employer and the buyers comply with their commitments. And the program also includes a culture survey to capture changes in workers' perceptions of gender-based violence and harassment at work over the course of the program. For up to now, in the survey, we have had 1,000 and over 1,000 workers who have contributed to the survey. Thank you.
Thank you, Advocate Jonas. Next we're going to hold the questions later, but next we have Ma'am Peggy Rampani, who's the Executive Director of Women Against Rape in Botswana. And she will be sharing insights on preventing violence through a holistic approach, drawing on experience from Botswana. Thank you, Ma'am. Ma'am Peggy.
Thank you very much. Dumelang bagaetsho. I must appreciate CSVR and the Netherlands for this symposium. I feel very honored to have been invited and to share a bit about Botswana. I know most people just see Botswana as the diamond and the Olympics. Yes, I just couldn't resist. Yes. But we are together. We are representing Africa, and yesterday we did it again in Switzerland. Yes. Anyway, back to GBV. I'm representing the government of Botswana. I'm also representing civil society organizations. I come here wearing two hats as the executive director of Women Against Rape, which is a human rights organization that is particularly looking at gender-based violence, both prevention, response, and mitigation, as it has been said before. I'm also one of the National Gender Commissioners advising the Minister of Gender on issues that we are talking about today. So this is the content that I will be talking to you about. And please, we are all from the same region, and our responses and prevention mechanisms are almost the same. I was talking with Robin yesterday that we are singing from the same hymn book, even though we are coming from different countries. So on the policy side, Botswana, as other African countries, we have two law systems. We have the common law and the traditional law. And unfortunately in Botswana, the traditional law is not written. I know we still have to benchmark in Lesotho and come with a written traditional law. Our traditional laws in Botswana, they differ from which tribe you come from. So as Mukalaka, Mungwato, Mungwaketsi, you will have your own practices that are practiced in your region. But we all go on the common law. And one of the law reforms that's been done in Botswana is the establishment of the Domestic Violence Act in 2008, which provides for protection orders, as we have been discussing. And this act also has regulations which are developed in 2013. And you will notice that we develop an act without regulations and takes time to develop the regulations, but eventually they are there. And we do suffer the same problems of implementation of the orders. The perpetrators still violate the orders. And I was learning from Malawi that we can also go through on civil litigation. So that's something I'm taking back with me. The penal code has been amended several times in Botswana to especially address sexual offenses. And the last amendment was in 2021 with the Sexual Registry Act. So now when you are convicted of a sexual offense, the perpetrators are going to go on a register, and they have to go through rehabilitation, and they have to declare that there are sexual offenders when they go into employment. And they're not even allowed to be employed where there are vulnerable people. The offenses, the charges have also gone up quite a lot. We also have the Anti-Human Trafficking Act that also covers, this was in 2014. It also covers crimes against children, the trafficking, and it also allows for the creation of shelters. As you might know, Botswana has only 2 shelters, women and children's shelters for those who have suffered abuse. And these shelters are run by NGOs. So we are still working with government to establish more shelters that are operated by government. These 2 shelters that are run by civil society do have the support of government, the financial support, but we still have to look for more funding. And one of those organizations belongs to Women Against Rape in Mau. We also have the Cyber Crimes and Computer-Related Crimes Act of 2018, and this also covers the crimes against children. We know that there's child pornography, the sexualization of children, they are covered in this act to make them prohibited. The Children's Act of 2009, we've been talking about child pregnancies. I very much like the conversation of not teenage pregnancies, but child pregnancies, so that we really highlight that this is about children. They are not adults. So thank you very much for that learning from me. We also have related policies like the National Policy on Gender and Development. The other prevention that we do is to enhance the capacity of service providers to provide effective and quality gender-based violence services. One of the projects that we did with measure evaluation under USAID funding was the development of the referral system, the referral pathways nowadays, and also the development of the GBV data collection systems. We are still not perfect in data collection, and I've been learning, and we'll be visiting some countries here to go and learn how they do data collection, especially in Namibia, our neighbor. I see they're making great strides that we can learn from. We have also developed standard operating procedures and managing processes for service providers. And these service providers, from the police, social workers, health, even the traditional leaders are part of the referral system, NGOs, basically everyone. We are engaging traditional leaders in reviewing the social norms. We've been talking a lot about social norms, changing social norms that are not promoting equality. We want social norms that will promote equality between women and men, equality between boys and girls, between all genders, between all sexualities. So we are engaging with traditional leaders at the highest level, from the highest level of Ngwadi Khosi, the chief's houses, right down to the communities. In Botswana, every community has a Khosi called a Khosana. So the Khosana reports to the Khosi reports to the House of Chiefs. So they are very, very critical in preventing gender-based violence. Also, there's the implementation of economic empowerment programs for women and girls led by the government through the Ministry of Gender. We also take very seriously public education on gender-based violence as part of prevention. We have community conversations, focus group discussions on the benefits of equality between men and women, boys and girls. This, we use the SASA approach from Raising Voices in Uganda, which has been tried and tested by the London School of Medical and Tropical Hygiene, that one. So we were part, as Women Against Rape, we were part of the research on the SASA approach to community mobilization to preventing violence against women and children. And this is the conversations that we carry on in our villages, in our communities in Botswana to prevent gender-based violence. We also have implemented the UNESCO, our talks that we had yesterday, and the UNFPA comprehensive sexuality education for in and out of school manuals that have been tested in the ESA community. So we are part of that, and we take that into the schools and out of schools. We train what we call community activists to promote gender equality within their communities. So get people in the communities that are trusted and welcomed and known by the people in their wards, in their communities. They actually select them for us to train, and these people are put back into the communities and they carry on the gender education, the gender equality education, and bring any cases that needs to be responded to us or to other service providers. So they are the eyes and legs and everything in the communities for us activists. There are gender committees that have been established through the National Policy on Gender, and this includes the setting up of the Gender Commission as well as the gender focal persons in all departments. So each ministry, each department, they must have a gender focal person who then is ensuring that there's gender mainstreaming in all activities that we do, in all plans, in all programs. The next one is engagement of men and boys in prevention of gender-based violence. We had this yesterday, a lot about it. And Botswana is not left behind. You know, we all subscribe, thank you, we all subscribe to the SADC Gender and the Protocol on Gender and Development, the Maputo Protocol, CEDAW, all these are covered in there that we should, as countries, comply. And as signatories to all these conventions and agreements, as a country, we also do. One thing I want to highlight there is this thing called Pitso ya Borre, men's general meetings. So the men are coming together in their social groups, whether it's a Saturday soccer group or Sunday soccer group, or their own meetings at the Shabins or wherever men go to. And they have their talks, their conversations on how they can balance power with women in their lives, with girls in their lives. We take it to the schools, the rest of the community. And finally, we have the GBV research to support development of evidence-based programs. And these are the standard research documents that are done throughout the SADC countries. And Botswana is not left behind. We may be behind by the years. As you can see, some of the reports where the surveys were done in 2016, 2017. So we are very much near to redoing those reports because they have to be done every 10 years or every 5 years. And so we are on track on that as a region. And I want to be proud to say that we shared with the Sexual Violence Research Institute on working on wellness programs for us, for us, the service providers, we got funding, and we're the 2 organizations in Africa to get that funding. So I'm very proud to have worked with Aisha on that project. Yeah, those are the pictures. You know, as civil society, we like pictures, and the donors want us to show that we actually do something. Yes, so these are our pictures and collaborations with the teachers, with the community, with the students. We don't leave anyone behind. With the community, as you can see, the local leaders participating in group discussions, etc., etc. And in conclusion, we need holistic approach. Leave no one behind. That's what the ecological model says. That's when the individual all the way to the policies. Thank you very much for your listenership.
Thank you, Ma'am Peggy. Next, we have Advocate Teresa Chuchu McMillan. She's the Executive Director of Mosaic Training Services and Healing Center for Women. And Teresa will speak to discuss the economic empowerment as a means to escape cycles of violence. Thank you, Teresa.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm not mic'd up because I was caught in the toilet line for a while. But thank you so much for your patience. Yeah, as Caroline has said, I am Tarisai representing Mosaic. Am I going the right way? Okay. So just a brief introduction. Mosaic, we're an African feminist organization. We're also community-based, and we're an NGO. These are 3 main identities that are very important to us because we are rooted particularly as a service organization. We provide quality and holistic integrated support services on the fore to survivors of domestic and intimate partner violence. We are anchored by our advocacy programs and our gender equality program focused on prevention. What we do is we balance response and prevention. We don't see them as binary. They're not divided in a binary way. They're integrated in a lot of ways. And this is linked to our 5-pillar program. So we have a support and healing, access to justice, and economic empowerment program. These are urgent, practical responses to survivor needs. They're anchored by our gender equality and safety, because the reality is we have seen the past few days as we've been discussing, and in our own experiences, I mean, we're preaching to the choir here, we know the complexities of domestic and intimate partner violence. It's easy for me to sit here and speak about all the solutions, but for the survivor, the person who experiences that violence, that experience is very real and personal to them, and some of them do not leave the relationship. And so that's why prevention has to be linked and integrated with our response services. So that's part of our work. We do work with men who use violence in relationships. Some actually change, and you know, the women who are in those relationships who are in our programs will testify and attest to how life has changed for them. And some leave, and that's what we're going to talk about, particularly with the highlight of the economic empowerment program. A big thing for us as Mosaic is the law. The law is both an enabler, but it can also be part of the system that hinders women to leave, to not access the rights that they have, and that's part of the work that we do, particularly around strengthening the Domestic Violence Act, particularly focused on implementation. So yes, we focus on advancing and making sure that the laws are in place, but our role particularly is to ensure that that police officer understands the law, that magistrates understands the law in a survivor-centered and in a way that they do not harm in the communities that we serve. So that's kind of like holistically what we focus on. My focus today in my, I don't know how many minutes I've got left, is economic empowerment. So through our continuum care model that I've highlighted, we activate women's agencies. We focus on equipping them with valuable skills that allow them to secure stable employment, start their own businesses, or engage in income-generating activities. Our aim is to enable them to make independent choices without the pressure of financial dependency. So often, particularly with our support and healing and access to justice, we do all the work, but in the end of that, she says to you, I can't leave. She wants to leave, but she can't leave. And it's all to do with money. He pays the bills, my children are living well, we're living in the community where it's close to school, Like the thought of even me going to find this job elsewhere means my children have to leave the school, they have to leave everything they know, and I can't do it. So what we try to do in the program is really try to remove that pressure. When we are trying to make sure that it's your choice, we are putting all those pillars in place. And when you make that choice, you really feel like, okay, it's my choice, I can leave. So money, we try to remove that barrier. With improved economic prospects, we want to ensure that they're better positioned to escape abusive relationships where there is no transformation happening in that, but that they're able to seek legal recourse, that they're able to establish safer, independent lives for themselves and their children. So that's quite important. And it's something that we desire, all of us here. We have our own histories, and that's what we want. So we seek to do that. Our key things, so in 2020 particularly, is where we learned. So we are 30 years old this year, and we learned the hard lesson in 2020 particularly. You know, so what I'm saying, all these lessons, you know about it as an organization, but when women were sent, you know, when we're all sent to our homes, when people were losing jobs, we actually really learned the hard lesson of what survivors actually experience because of money. And that's where we launched the Pieces to Peace project. It offers training in basic sewing skills, unlocking doors to economic freedom. It was started as a simple project with the Charlize Theron, you know, with the emergency fund. They gave us an opportunity, and we really had to dig deep. Okay, we could buy masks, you know, sanitizers, all the things we're doing, but we were like, okay, you know, part of the program's team was just like, think deeply, what can we actually do to really change lives? And so and we had an opportunity with another donor who gave us industrial machines. I don't sew, many of us don't, but we came together, and actually one of the survivors who knew how to sew is the one who came up with the idea and says, okay, maybe we could do this. And with this like loose hanging idea around Pieces to Peace that was floating in the organization, and this emerged. And from that emergence, so it's actually grown in the past 4 years to now with 3 levels in the program. Part of this, what number one is, not everyone who survived domestic violence wants to sew. That's not what it is. Yeah, just because you're a survivor, you don't have money, you want to sew. So part of it is we make sure that they go through support and healing, and also the people that go into Pieces to Peace and the economic programs are people who've actually gone through the counseling services, that they're at a point where the social worker says, okay, they're ready. So they go through, if they are not economically employed or they don't have their own businesses, they can participate. So level 1 is about generating interest. You can all come, you know, it's exposure. Through that exposure, if you're really interested, you then go into level 2. In level 2, it's an intensive program. It's 8 weeks. You are paid a stipend. So part of it, we also understand that participating in a program means I'm not looking for a job. So it can't be that I'm spending my time in that program just sewing and learning with my kids. After that long day of training, then I still have to go and find money for bread. So that stipend is important. Through another donor, we have food parcels. So for the 8 weeks, they receive food parcels that are actually quite a grocery hamper that enables them, so that the stipend also helps them to come to work, to participate in the training, but also they don't have the stress of the food. If they really are interested and they show like the skill, then they go into the anchoring. That's now anchoring talent. We are literally now preparing you for business. So for instance, we just had our gala dinner for our 30th, and Rachel, Khaleesi, and myself are wearing that's one of the seamstresses, you know, Rosita, she made those dresses, you know, that we're wearing. Those are dresses. So part of my pitch is not necessarily just to talk about the program, we're pitching the business. You're all our clients. Yes. She's one of our clients. Yes. She's wearing a Pieces to Peace. I'm wearing a Pieces to Peace. This is a business that they are running. They make money when in level 3. The money goes back into them. It's also a social enterprise that parts of the profits are going back into the sewing and going to help level 1 and level 2. We have a head trainer. That head trainer volunteers his time. It's actually a male, which is an unintended consequence that a male volunteered to do this, which actually is helping us. We had this mini evaluation that was done 2 years ago. And it was interesting how the ladies just shared how that's changing the way they relate to men. because he treats them with respect. You know, just the little things that he does, even making them tea, like I've never had a man make a cup of tea for me. Things that we didn't design in the program are also like coming into the fore. So, you know, it's handcrafted, they make all sorts of things, and I'm about to show you some of the bags. There was our big program in Pieces to Pieces, the safety bags. They make two types of bags. One is called a survivor bag that you can purchase if you want, okay? And I don't have them now, but we can send it to you. But I do have one for myself that you can look at and see the quality of it. Online as well, yes. You can order it from us. You can contact us. So there are two types of bags. One is you can choose, so corporate, they can choose to donate a survivor bag inside their pockets. And if survivors are thinking about leaving, they can put all their documents in. No, it's not branded Pieces to Piece or Mosaic. It's just a bag that lives at home. I put all my documents there, IDs, birth certificates, all of that. The day I decide to leave, I just pick up that bag. The man who's using violence against me just thinks it's a nice bag that we have. You know, that's one. Or you can choose just your backpack for yourself, which, you know, you can buy, it's branded. So that's part of my marketing. We make jackets, we make lanyards, tote bags, all sorts of things that we make. They make these just in participating. These are products that they're selling for themselves. And if at level 3, particularly between level 2 and level 3, if you decide you don't want to continue with Mosaic, you can graduate and you receive an industrial machine for yourself and you can run your own business. That's part of it. And that is important to us because, and this is a conversation we had with donors in a deep way. We don't want to do surface level economic empowerment that does not actually translate into money in my bank account. We do not want to have survivors or beneficiaries, and I'm using the word beneficiaries deliberately now because that's a charity way. We're not running a charity. I grew up in a township. I knew university was my way out of poverty. That's the same attitude we must have when we work with survivors, that she sees a future for her children. And she does not want to become a token for NGOs, where she continues to tell her story and shares as a token, but she does not see money in the bank, and her children do not go into quality schools that I myself send my own children to. And that's the purpose of our program. So that's something that we do. Part of our activating agency, like I mentioned, not everyone wants to sow. So we do have, I have 1 minute. We do have, for instance, we have 2 shelters, and in our stage 2 shelters, we're very deliberate about in the 3 months when they exit, a woman must be able to start her own life. So we make sure that they have computer skills, that language is a big thing because we're in a rural community. So they have to speak language. They have to be able to communicate with an employer. So that's a big part of it. We've got accredited courses that we run that try to propel them to make sure that they're able to be marketable and find jobs or start their own businesses. That's part of it. Some of our Pieces to Peace, contact us, please. We know you host conferences. We know you're doing many things, but also you want to look good for all the conferences that you attend. So contact Mosaic. We are now your preferred service provider. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Teresa. And yes, I always wear Pieces to Peace. Please support them. Next, we have our next speaker is Dr. Harsha Dayal. She's the Director of the Research and Knowledge at the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation. She'll be presenting on GBV knowledge management. Thank you. Let's welcome Dr. Dayal.
Thank you. Am I audible?
Yes.
Sure. Thank you very much. So I think that I actually want to thank Liesl and CSVR for putting together this piece, because the theme from this morning, from yesterday and the summary this morning, data and evidence, it's the back end story, and we don't dedicate an entire just this part of it. So I really want to thank you for putting this together. But I did say, and it's sneaking a little bit, strategic knowledge management. So I wear 3 hats here. I'm Director of Research and Knowledge Management at DPME, which is my primary job. I've been working in the GBV space for the past 3-4 years, synthesizing and analyzing and building evidence maps. But this year I have been seconded to the private office of the president, and this is our business. So basically the National Strategic Plan on GBVF has been spoken about. I'm not going to talk about that today because of the behind the scenes story, but why I'm bringing out strategic knowledge management. And I hope that my few slides will illustrate that. So we know the crisis, and we've been hearing not only for this last 2 days, but also in all the networks we've been working with, why and how GBVF continues to be the pandemic that we have been and we have been taking it out in our communication strategies as well. So let me allow this few slides. Sorry, it's not. Is it the green one? Yeah. So we have been talking, and I'm really inspired by Jane, the keynote speaker yesterday, but I want to draw on an African wisdom from a Nigerian writer and activist, that multiple stories representing our collective history, voices, and experience do not get captured enough. But please go through her TED Talk, because we drew from her TED Talk and applied it from arts to the science, applied it very much to the danger of a single story, that the single story creates a stereotype. And the problem with stereotypes is that not that they are untrue, but that they are incomplete. And if we take this into what I've just said, where our position is, that there's much complexity behind knowledge generation on GBV prevention. Now, I want to zoom into prevention because we know from the point of perpetration, from the point of the incidents going forward, we've heard a lot of the interventions, but this multi-stakeholder approach, we know what needs to be done. Often we get lost in how. And this part of it is where we want to know the representation of multiple stakeholder groups. The GBV, the National Strategic Plan, is not one plan of government. It's a social compact. It's a whole of society, whole of government approach. And for that matter, everybody who's in this room today, the kind of interventions you are doing, we need to understand that from the level that we are in, that effective analysis, and we've spoken about that throughout these last 2 days, that different sources of evidence is needed. Now, I think Aisha's talk this morning brought out this whole thing of who's doing the research, right? Let's take that one notch up as well. And that we need this integration and coordination of everything that we are doing in the same space. Our realities are reflected in local context, and it's only there that change is going to happen. That we cannot be talking global when local hasn't been affected to the change that we want to see. So this is in all the spaces that we find, women and girls operating in. But now the complexity comes in, what type of information we are gathering along this process. People have brought out M&E, the interventions, diagnostics of the problem. Do we have the diagnostics right? Whose voice has been in that kind of diagnostic? But the strategic options. And again, the strategic litigation was very encouraging this morning as well, because what do we mean by strategic as well? Is it not bringing in the voices, but also to be able to have the governance structures in place? And then we see the progression from a program to strategies, to policies, but also to projects. How do we build the system, right? And that's the complexity. Now, we've all spoken about different stakeholders, and I just want to bring out this slide that brings out the complexity just for us in government. Think about just for civil society alone, for the NGO sector, for the private sector, all the different interventions. So if you look at the first row, it's the level of institutional coordination and integration we are talking about. Yes, the criminal justice system, starting with victim-centric data, but look at the others, right? And I think that this is where we start to see the complexity and the dependencies on each other. If we work this out to be beyond government. The private sector is collecting its own information. Civil society is collecting its own information. At the NGO level, all the different projects, do we always have all information at hand when we make decisions? It will never be possible. So let's not strive to completeness. Let's just collaborate and gather the information as and when we need it. This was just one part of it. So what we do see is that GBVF research entails this continuum. Now, we have been operating in the green sector, the green part of it, which is the evidence. That's curated, it's reports. I think CSVR, in terms of the kind of information that we get, not just from one organization that's working in the space, think about all the organizations that take out reports. Now, at our level, we need to have integrated all these reports to come up with a statement that the president will have to make, right? How do we treat these reports? It's not, it needs to be treated equally as well. And that's the representation that we speak about with data. But our point is to bring out usable knowledge. And I think between policy and practice, what is usable knowledge? That's what we are looking for. But we have to backtrack because the inequality comes in whose data was represented there. And that's where the inequality comes in, where a completed report starts to take samples, and science talks about sampling, you know, so this is where we have to start thinking about it. So I just want to give you a quick glimpse into what we have started here. When we talk knowledge management, you have generic frameworks on KM. And in all of the KM information base that you'll talk about, the private sector really likes knowledge management. I think us in the civil society as well as in government, KM is like in your computer, in your folders. Are you organized in how you can generate a report quickly out of your folders? But this is now higher level than this. People think about process and people as in technology. Part of KM looks at that. Part of KM looks at sharing, collaboration, and learning. And part of KM looks at what do we know, who is doing that work. But for us, we had a missing component. It's the integration and coordination component. And this is what we started to map. All the existing evidence, and we start to see behind the scenes those gaps that become very visible in who's doing this work, why are they doing it, and you can see behind the scenes this kind of integrating work that is needed. And we're starting to see the conceptual building blocks that I took you back to the data, right? That if you only have scientific data, yes, it's credible, yes, it's reliable, and the way that scientists want to be able to declare the surveys representative of society, but it's not enough, right? Because it's not capturing everything. We know that spatially we are seeing differences between different provinces, different districts. So how, where services are available, why is the prevalence still so high there? We need a different kind of analysis there, right? Is the victim preferring to go to a service in another district because of the victimization that's happening there, right? So at a visual glance, you want to bring all of that, and we are using the district development model there. I've mentioned the administrative data, but it's not just government that generates administrative data. The court data that civil society is doing work there, the NGOs that are already doing work at the point of the shelters, it's collecting that information and being representative at what is going on at a local level. The networks, we all know that in our communities, I can pick up a phone and call a friend or somebody. The networks that exist doesn't get captured well. And this is where we've been working with World of Impact as well. But the other last and the most unstructured is the big data on social sciences, social media. And we also know that this frightens the scientists because it's not representative, but we also know that this is where younger girls are beginning to report more on. So we're beginning this process, and we've just started on this part of it. And if we think about it, this is my last slide. what makes us, what makes strategic knowledge management this important at the level that we are? It leads to intelligence and useful knowledge. How? We've mentioned that a danger of a single study for policy and practice is very important to overcome by bringing in a whole lot of collective ideas, right? But the new knowledge is generated by the patterns that rest in its totality. And what is the pattern? If you take a slice in time on a survey 3 years ago, the pattern may have changed, but you're still working on that data from 3 years, of even 5 years ago or 10 years ago when a population statistics is coming out. So the sum is more than its parts. And this is systems thinking. I think everybody who brings in systems thinking is that one is, and Teresa had illustrated it so well. They set out to have the empowerment program, but just to have one male figure there, the value add is much more. Addressing complexity is and measuring societal impact is complex, as we have illustrated, but we need to understand this in context and that it is more relevant at a local level, but we're missing that local level evidence. Being pragmatic, if you only know in your own workspaces, you have 10 reports to get through. How do we deal with that? Right? It's a reality that everybody has. So I just wanted to illustrate this part of it, and just to say that in the National Strategic Plan of the Gender-Based Violence, Pillar 6 is what we do. We are co-conveners as government. So CSVR is a second co-convener, and the Human Sciences Research Council is our third co-convener. So this is where we're working together in this space already. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Asha, for that insightful presentation. Next, our final speaker would be Nomke from the World of Impact, that will be discussing the framework of the possible solutions within the framework of the 100 Days Challenge. Thank you, Nomke.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and good morning. It's still morning. Good morning, everyone. Basically, I think my focus really to talk about one of the models that we actually have been using implement the NSP. And the reason we're working on this model is because we've tried in a number of areas and we've seen the change that is actually being realized. And as Harsha is talking about knowledge management and data and things like that, what we also embed in that process is the collection of information so that you know where you started and where you're going. And we've actually discovered that's the most difficult part, because we all start where we don't know. So most of the time, the first action that a team would take is to define the baseline, because they wouldn't have even known where they are. And the idea is that if you don't know where you are, how are you going to making any progress? So basically, I'm just gonna share with you the model of 100 days challenges, because normally when people hear 100 days challenges, they just think of a campaign that's just raises awareness and all that. But there's a lot that happens in it, and the idea is that the outcome, the results are very much impactful. So it's the kind of results that you would expect in about 3 years or a year, and you're able to actually get that within 100 days. And I'll try to show you some of the results if we have the time. I've got a video here, but I think I'm gonna pass it because of the time. We'll see how we go. But so like any other project, 100 days challenge, it's a project. It's an intentionally designed project that has a time frame, and that has a goal, has a team, and has a plan. And the difference basically is the fact that it uses what the behaviors that you would see in a crisis. When you look at a crisis, there are certain behaviors that get activated because you are in a crisis. You've got to solve a problem that seems impossible within a short space of time. So in that way, you begin to put new eyes in the way that you look at things, and then you start shifting things so that you actually are able to solve the crisis. So is it moving? I'm not gonna play the. Yes, yeah. So what the 100 Days Challenges does, it actually harnesses those behaviors that would actually come in a crisis. The first one is intense collaboration. So just to make an example, I think when we had COVID-19, we had a command center. It was made up of all the different departments, your health. It was a health issue, but the Department of Health on its own would not be able to, so they wouldn't be able to enact policies and legislation that would empower certain arms of government to move with speed. So there was intense collaboration. And then the other aspect which is important on the 100 Days Challenges is the frequent innovation. So what we do with the teams is that they will come up with a plan. And if that plan doesn't seem to be taking them where they need to go, they've got to think, they've got to sit back and say, it's not taking us where we want to go. What else can we do? So frequently they innovate, and also they turn the ideas into action as quickly as possible. So there's rapid implementation. But what is important, the real principle behind the 100 Days Challenges is that it places agency in the teams themselves. So we would have what we call 100 Days Ambassador. Commissioner Tando is here. She was one of the people that was trained, and when we were piloting within the NGBVF collective. But the idea is that those people are going to be more the kernels of a collaborative environment, because we know in collaboration, it's just not about sitting on the table and talk together. It's really about, understanding, when does Tarisai come in with economic empowerment? Where does social development come in with healing and all that? So you weave that nicely together. So in a collaborative environment, that's when you create that kind of spirit and that kind of working together. So we train those ambassadors to really manage that situation where we all start to look at things and act differently. And what is important is that the teams, once they've been they've been set up, once an issue has been agreed upon, that let's look at maintenance cases, they're going to have to see what is the ecosystem of a maintenance process. It is not just the court. There's many other interventions that actually form part of the process. So what they would do, once they've agreed on that, they look at the ecosystem and all the different stakeholders that are in that ecosystem. They become part of the team that will implement that particular issue that we're working on, and they will set the goal. And when you look at the goal, I want to quickly go to the goal. Yeah, when you look at the goal that they actually going to set, it's gonna be more of something that shakes your stomach. You feel, there's no way I can meet this, and that's where the agency comes from, and that's where the shaking of the normal ways of doing comes from. So they will come up with a very unreasonable goal. And just to give you an example, if I'm gonna talk about a project that we ran in Salt Blakey. So what they did, there's an area that is regarded as a hotspot for gender-based violence and femicide. So they were very concerned that, there's high occurrence of gender-based violence and femicide. So they decided, okay, so what do we do? And then they said, let's raise awareness and let people know. And then the probing then goes to say, once people know, what do you want them to do? What is the result? So we help them to probe, and then eventually they say, yeah, but we want to see less occurrence, so that becomes the goal. And the simple thing that they did first was to go there together and look, and they realized that, the risk for violence is so high because the area is so dirty. There's grass and things like, so it's like it promotes violence, you know. So they decided, oh, okay, to reduce violence, let's get service delivery departments to go and deal with the grass, the lights and everything. They did that. And within 100 days, the occurrence of GBV in that area went down by 43%. And what it also did, it motivated the municipality to really start looking at service delivery in a different eye. You know, they started, you know, going to all other areas. So after the 100 days challenge, they identified other areas that could be risky and all that. So basically, so what this model says is that you know, when you start looking at things in an intentional manner and defining the goal in the right way, I think then it helps you to actually then come up with interventions and be able to see whether you're making progress or not. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Nomke. Thank you to all the speakers for the very insightful presentations. I'm going to open up the floor for discussion. We have to end. The ambassador needs to leave by 12:30, so I'm going to take 5 hands only. Okay, and please be short, please be brief, not give us a reflection or question or summary, but please be brief. I want to give back to the panelists again so I'm going to number 1, the commissioner, number 2, number 3, the gentleman at the back is number 4, and then number 5. Sure. Yeah, yes, so many. 5. I'm going to have to stop. No, Sabrina, you're not number 5. Sorry. this lady with the pink, and then I'll make Sabrina number 6, and then I'll give over to number 7, number 8. But I need you to be very brief. We cannot go over time. The ambassador has to leave. Thank you. Are you coming to the mic, number 1? Yeah, Commissioner. Yes, the mics is here along the aisle. If you can come to the mics, please. Thank you.
So I just wanted to go to what Umam Nomgqibelo had spoken about with the NSP and the 100 days challenges. So as she had mentioned, I was the first cohort of the ambassadors and implementers of 100 days challenges and the NSP. And I really want to urge everyone beyond just South Africa that everyone is doing different things and we've all got different mandates, whether it's from constitutional bodies, whether it's an NGO or whether it's government. But I urge that whichever region you come from, there's always that one thing that every single person has to get behind. In South Africa, the one thing is the NSP GBVF. The bishop had mentioned yesterday that the NSP and the pillars are like a Bible document. And I couldn't have said it better myself. Everyone needs to get behind the 100 days challenges because it allows us to quickly identify a problem that is isolated and come up with solutions with relevant stakeholders in the community, which then goes to my last point that we have to fund the fight against gender-based violence and femicide adequately. And the 100 days challenges and the outcomes that come from there are one of those things that the private sector could easily fund and ensure that once the outcomes come out, there is money that backs up that project and ensures that it actually works and continues beyond the 100 days. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Number 2, yes.
Thank you very much, Director of Proceedings. I want to reflect on what Mama was talking about with regards to protection orders. I actually wanted to mention this yesterday. I'm Upside from Namibia. Yesterday during that topic, I think it was the first session about the effectiveness of protection orders, and I just wanted to share with the colleagues on what happened back home. Recently, a lot of legislation was amended by Parliament, including the Rape Act, the Domestic Violence Act, maintenance, and one of the areas was to improve the effectiveness of protection orders. For example, usually, you know, an application will be made, the police will serve, you get out and that's it. And it brought a lot of problems because it even led to some people losing lives because of the setup. Now the new amendment, for example, brought in the mandatory psychosocial support programs for the perpetrator. So education, that is very important. And as well, the new amendments also brought in, let's say, emergency protection orders. A protection order is a court order. And a court is Monday to Friday, but Sunday and Saturday and Sunday, crime does not go on holiday. So they empowered the police to work closer together with the legal officers to actually institute emergency protection orders. This is just to improve the setup. What is it that I wanted to mention? Yesterday, my commissioner mentioned about the safe place for the one-stop shop setup, which is also specifically on the GBV protection unit. You know, these setups are very important, and as civil society, it's very much important to also advise and also work together with government to improve. Because, for example, that unit was first called Women and Child Protection Unit, and that was discriminatory. And men saw that already as a threat, and men already have this thing to say, you know, family law is just here to protect women. So we had to change that name. I think it went to GBV Protection Unit. It later went to GBV Victim Protection Unit. So things should evolve. Things should change as we move on. I just wanted to reflect a bit
Thank you
with
so
what
much.
Mama said. Thank you.
Okay. Number 3.
Good morning, everybody. Libisa Lakaki Jane Mamatsempolo. So, for those who are based in South Africa, I desperately need you to please write this down, okay? The word emerging for, EMERGING with the number 4, there's no space. And then on the side, you write 33103. Do we have that? Yes. Emerging for to 33103. Thank you so much. I will acknowledge you when I get my DSTV Content Creator Award. So please SMS the word to those numbers. Okay. So thank you in advance. My question goes to Mama Peggy. Thank you so much to everybody for the beautiful, beautiful presentations. I think I'm at a space where I'm like, oh my goodness, I want to collaborate with you when you, and I'm gonna stalk all of you. Do not judge. I want to know in terms of their Sexual Offenders Act. You mentioned that these men are taken into rehabilitation. How long is that? And what does rehabilitation look like? And in the rare instances, I hope it's rare instances where the woman falsely accuses the man, then what's the mitigation? Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm audible. Oh, okay, thanks. I think I am so much interested on the issue of the 100-day challenge, especially because it's a very new model for us. I think we're not so aware of it in my country. But I will quite firstly appreciate the fact that it is reviving the spirit of urgency in terms of providing interventions in our communities. But I am also concerned in terms of how does it ensure sustainability as it is making interventions within that short period of time. And secondly, how do you therefore ensure there is no false reporting with the interventions that you have implemented in that short period of time in trying to perhaps convince yourself that you have made those interventions in society to that large scale, when in the actual sense, it is not as it is reflected on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I can't take the end at the back.
Good day. My name is Sibongile Mukapana from Politics for Her. Closer. Okay. I hope I'm audible. My name is Sibongile Mukapana from Politics for Her. I've actually had 2 questions. I think one is directed at you, Advocate Jonas. I'm originally from Lesotho as well. So I know the project you're working on the Ningxing factory initiative, how it's solely, the scope is within the factories of Ningxing. But now with the textile industry being the second largest employer back home, we're seeing a trend of a lot of factories closing down. So it means a lot of job security is a concern right now. And we're seeing a trend of labor malpractices and sexual harassment and exploitation of these women trying to secure these jobs. What kind of support do you think the consortium or the initiative needs currently to extend to women that work in other factories? I think my second question or comment, I think it's directed to the floor and maybe the panel. I think all of us are people that are working in the women's rights space, and gender issues is on technology facilitated gender-based violence, which is we like spaces like this because it's a safe space. We have one voice and an understanding about women's rights issues. But when we go online and we try to convey the message, create awareness and sensitize people, there's that pushback, and it's very pervasive. And it attacks us as a collective, but it's also an issue where it also attacks you at an individual level, where you're expressing a concern about maybe a polarized issue. Then you have someone, because of the internet and the perks of it, being able to give you that sense of anonymity online. People don't respect people like if it was in such a convention. And we're seeing that a lot of women, or at least digital activists, are starting to self-censor because of the pushback, because the threat does not just end online with trolling and harassment and bullying. It sometimes even extends to offline. People are getting rape threats or even threats of death. And what are we doing to also protect ourselves as a community of people who are saying, we're feminist, even if you're not feminist, we're people on gender issues, and gender is a very sensitive issue. What are we saying as a region? And I think as a community, and how do we protect ourselves?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. She want to, sorry, Evelyn, I can't take your question. Yes. No. I've got this lady, and then I've got Sabrina, and then that's it. And you, sorry, but please be brief. The ambassador has to leave by 12:30. Please be brief. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'll keep it brief. Thank you very much to the panelists and the facilitators for just highlighting the various approaches that can be used in fighting GBV. I'm Valerie Juya. I work for an organization in Zimbabwe, and I'm pleased to be here. It's also my first time attending such a platform, and there are some key takeaways that I think we can share with the facilitators as well, with the room at large. And then also just to acknowledge the efforts made by Mosaic. You opened up our eyes around other interventions that we can use outside the legal support, outside the psychosocial support, and outside the shelter support. So thank you very much for sharing your experiences with us. I think we do definitely have a lesson to take back home. But my key takeaway now would be also looking at, I was just inquiring with other ladies, do we have a platform outside this symposium? What platform do we have for organizations so that we're able to see what other organizations are doing? I was sharing an example of a GBV system that we have in Zimbabwe, which is not as ideal as we would want, but at least it's a starting point. Partners know each other. We're able to share what interventions we're using, and also just see and profile our work, not only in South Africa, but also across the regions. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Hi, I hope I'm audible. My name is Situmeleng Marwai from the Foundation for Human Rights. And mine is actually around psychosocial support, just because it's central to this topic of GBV. And I hear us talking a lot around how to mainstream things around gender and also like interventions on GBV. But then the question is, how do we mainstream mental health in a way that is accessible and go hand in hand with the interventions that we do on GBV? And I say this thinking in terms of what I think Aisha said, that we will create harm if there isn't proper evidence on what is required in terms of the activities that we're going to do. So that is my point, and I want to go again to Mosaic around the economic empowerment. We run a project at FHR on called Growing Food for Life. And as you say, not everybody, just because they are victims or they are survivors, are actually going to be interested in gardening or in sewing. Yes. So I really speak to you outside of this just to hear how the sustainability of this process. So yeah, I think that's that. But data, help us with data in terms of the best psychosocial support that are accessible in the long term, because otherwise someone receives one session and afterwards, then what happens to them? So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Sabrina's the last one, and then we'll go back to the panelists. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sabrina. I'm the founder of Women for Change. My question is to Dr. Harsha, because she spoke on the large volume on social media data. Women for Change mainly advocates and educates online. We're reaching 10 million people every month. And we also do online victim support, which I believe has become very, very vital in the space. As you mentioned, it's a lot of young people reaching out. We have up to 150 survivors, family members reaching out to us daily. So my question is, for us as an organization, especially without the right resources, without funding, it is almost impossible to collect the data. And we're sitting on massive data on social media space. So my question to you is, how are you able to support organizations like ours in that space to find solutions? And yeah, that is actually it, to collect that so important data.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Sabrina. I'm really sorry that we're rushing through this, but we are mindful of the time. I want to hand over to our panelists to each give you a minute each to conclude in whatever you can answer from the floor, and then just leave us with something. Thank you.
Thank you. Am I audible? Yes. Firstly, thank you, Spangile, for your question. So I think the first thing that needs to happen in order for gender-based violence and harassment in the workplace to be an issue that is holistically addressed, not just in the factory or garment industry, but holistically in the workplace in general. We have heard from a representative from ILO that Lesotho has ratified C190. So what we have been pushing for C190 to be domesticated and translated into national laws that will be enforceable. That's the first one. And second one, I think it was around a year and a half or so ago when the government was going towards a public service GBVH policy initiative. I'll have to check how far that is, because also public service is a big employer in the country. And also there needs to be advocacy for GBVH policies in the sector as well. And because I think somebody said that, I don't know if it was yesterday or this morning, that policies or legal frameworks without implementation are not very useful. We will need to have a robust implementation policies that includes education and awareness, that as we can learn from the current program, education and awareness, reporting mechanisms, and an independent implementing body. I want to comment on the issue of protection orders. As a legal practitioner, I know that I think somebody last year at the symposium last year said that there is a difference between law and justice. Protection orders is manifestation of a law, but in enforcement of a protection order is justice, or the perpetrator adhering to the protection order is justice, because a protection order is the paper. So if you have a perpetrator that doesn't care anymore, whether or not that paper is there, it doesn't matter. The paper does not guarantee the safety of a victim. Thank you.
Thank you, Advocate Jonas. Ma'am Peggy.
Thank you very much for the question on sexual offenders rehabilitation. This is a new act in Botswana, and it will be having regulations soon, but it's supported by psychologists, which are like few and far between in the country, even in the whole Southern Africa. So we are trying very much to have those clinical psychologists available to do the correction. And then false accusations, they're also provided in the Act. If there are any false accusations, they'll go to prosecution and there are penalties for that. You can check our acts, they're available online. And finally, from me, is that we all need to have our hands on deck so that we prevent violence against women and girls, as well as sharing working replicable solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ma'am Peggy. Terasai.
I think for me, maybe I'll just touch on mental health and psychosocial support, because support and healing. So like I highlighted that Mosaic works on support and healing, and psychosocial support is a key element. So when we talk about, if we want to actually prevent GBV, and we can't think of it just from a perpetration, we have to think of those who have experienced it, because we know the cycles of violence and the intergenerational and transference of that violence. And if a survivor doesn't heal, the chances of that transferring throughout the generation, that life course approach is important. So for us, we invest in our social workers having to provide them therapeutic support services with the focus on support and healing being a key part of it. We provide short, medium, and long term because it's completely linked to the needs of the survivor. Some heal quickly, some take a while, some take longer, some stop, then come back over and over again. And that is the complexity of domestic and intimate partner violence. And we have to be patient with it. And in our design of our programs and in our negotiations with funders, and I'm speaking now from a funding perspective, because at Mosaic, we are like, people know, some of my donors, they know, I literally push back, and we have to push back on numbers. We don't fight with the number system of like trying, even DSD. You can win the war with DSD in those conversations, as hard as it may be. But when we teach them how that we are not working with numbers and human beings, if this month we saw 5 people, we can show you why that social worker could only speak to 5, because it took 10 sessions with that one client. You're going to have to buy my story, because I can show you that evidence. And that's the big thing that we do. Another thing around psychosocial is that we have to move away from just talk therapy. I'm a lawyer. I'm not a social worker. So my whole thing is around research and designing and working with them. But what I've really learned from our social workers is that talk therapy is not enough. When they say the body keeps the score, it is very, very true. So we work with psychologists who help us to improve our processes so that we're not just using a chair, 2 chairs in a room and talking to them. We do various activities, and what heals one will not heal the next. And that's something that we have to accept in this space.
Thank you. So, thank you.
Yeah, I'm audible, right?
Yes.
I just, before I answer the very direct question, I just want to say that this intergenerational trauma and the prevention strategies are probably the bedrock of not just because of GBV. We're talking about gender-based violence as the entry point into why we are all here. But it's the kind of trauma, long-term trauma, and we are trying to link that with the decolonial agenda as well.
Yes.
That this is long-term trauma that goes from one generation, it gets passed on, and we don't even realize it's happening to us. So it's that what should be there and not be sort of because of the symptom and the causality issue that we're talking about, right? So that one, just to as a comment. The part of the social media part, and I really will talk to you afterwards as well. We had to put that as part of what we do to bring out the non-scientific way of where reporting is happening, right? And that it's unstructured data. Now think about the process of curation that we need to anonymize it. We need to now bring out all of that. But there are experts that can take this data, pull it out. Now, you all know that you are victims of Google. Somehow you just went into 5 seconds of going into something, and Google suddenly sends you so much information. That's AI generated, right? They know your shopping, they know your behavior, they know where you want to get your products. So this is the kind of intelligence we're talking about, that where is this happening? And we're bringing in some of the specialists around this that are marketing orientated, but with a GBV focus to say, you know, one incident like it happened in South Africa last year, Oscar Pistorius was released on bail and social media flared up because of that one. But what's happening, what kind of conversations are going on the ground? There are specialists that can just bring that all out. Now we're trying to show that that is a source of data, credible data. One voice can change an entire sentiment on the ground, right? So that's one source, but we do have to influence the scientific world as well separately. Now we're bringing out all of this because I didn't speak to it today, but it's about co-production of knowledge. That your knowledge and your knowledge is not different from each other. It's your experience that counts. And if your experience doesn't get explicitly acknowledged, it remains inside. And she just said, it starts to eat us up inside of ourselves. So I think this co-production of knowledge is where the analysis has to be happening collectively. It's not an expert analysis only or government officials analysis only. It's what happens on the local levels, right? And so that's what I just wanted to say. The intentions behind anything needs to show that, and this is the 100-day challenge. And one of the sustainability issues is, maybe she'll speak to it, is to say, let's bring it into the NSP space, into politics.
Thank you, Asha. Thank you. Yeah, maybe just to continue from the sustainability space. So the program is really designed with sustainability in mind, because we actually call it a journey of discovery. Because all the things that seems to have been backlogged, sort of kind of areas that impede implementation and all that, the teams gather that information, and at the end of the 100 days challenges, they go to the leaders and they tell them, if you remove this and this, or you add this and this, we will be able to continue to work in this way and ensure that what we have achieved now becomes the norm in terms of our overall achievement. And I think really our aim now is to ensure that the leaders do take that information and be able to ensure sustainability, but also because we train people within an institution. So you like living capacity for someone to start working in this different way. So that's also builds into the capacity. And also on the reporting, like I said, most of the time we start by identifying where are we, and our interventions is really trying to find out from them. If you want to tell me that there are reports, where do you record it? So we look at all that information and they would bring that in, and then would help them come up with a more simple data capturing system, so that if let's say you wanted to increase to reduce the backlog, if this is the backlog and these cases are going, once a case has been done and it's finalized and everything is fine, you capture it in some form of a document, and then you count every week. And then in that way, even if you want to see, you can be able to look at that document and see, this is the case number, and it can be corroborated. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all the panelists. Thanks to the speakers for your valuable contributions, and to everyone for your participation. So the lessons shared today remind us that while the challenge of gender-based violence is immense, our collective efforts and shared knowledge can pave the way for meaningful change. And thank you to CSVR for the platform for the second Southern African Symposium on Preventing GBV. Thank you.
Uyabona ndinovu uyo andibona ubuso bakho ndibulela umdali.
Thank you, everyone. Can we just remain seated, please? Please can we remain seated? Thank you. We just want to also say thank you to everyone for joining us, and thank you to the ambassador of the Netherlands for hosting us. And really, I hope everybody gained something from this fruitful conversations and everything else. So we'll just allow the ambassador to provide closing remarks, and then we can all go for lunch or leave wherever we're doing.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here and staying here for 2 days. I hope you were not too cold today. This morning it really started chilly, but it's good to see that you're still all here. So many deliberations, so many emotions, so many experience, so many very good introductions and moderators here. So I just want to thank you all. And I have a little bit of a speech prepared here. So from our deliberations over the past 2 days, we can conclude that GBV concerns everyone. It takes place everywhere. I must say, I mean, you talk about here Southern Africa, in Europe, I mean, we have the same kind of discussions. It's everywhere. It's not specifically Southern Africa. It takes place everywhere, and we all agree that ending it for good calls for action by all of us. We can all be part of solving the crisis of GBV. We also learned these days that the challenges of GBV require a comprehensive, holistic, and multifaceted approach, and in-depth research and data. And I just heard, I mean, that was being mentioned as well, and to share that together. A lot of resources and efforts have been put into addressing GBV, and several approaches have been suggested. And there's a need for us to work together to strengthen prevention, mitigation, and response interventions in order for us to have impact. I look forward to the report that will be drawn right now with the recommendations, and I hope in our next symposium we can reflect on how these recommendations have been put into practice. I'm confident that this symposium is not an end in itself, but the beginning of new relationships, partnerships, and strengthening of efforts. I really saw a lot of people, I mean, I couldn't be here all the time, but for you to connect together, so much is going on, to be aware. I mean, I heard about the platform, sharing experiences, sharing data, so much can be done. And I really look forward indeed to the third symposium to see how we can, what has been done and how to take it forward, that we just go on discussing and hearing all the things again and again. No, we should try to make things work and that there should be progress. So I'm confident that this symposium is not an end in itself, but the beginning of new relationships, partnerships, and strengthening of efforts. So I'm going also to borrow this African expression that I hear a lot. So when you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. And I think that's very much the case in this on this issue. So thank you again for being here. I just want to also express my real thanks to my staff, Charity, Robin, Palisa. I mean, it was I must confess, we never had such a big crowd, and I have to apologize for indeed things that didn't go smoothly. So we also learn our lessons for next time. But thank you for being here, and it was an honor to host you. So thank you for coming. I wish you safe travels back home. I really that you took the effort, and I think, I mean, if we would organize it for 4 days, 5 days, I think you will be able to fill it. So I'm sorry that we have to cut it short right now, but yeah, I'm looking forward to meeting you again next year. I really wish you a lot of how do you say, strength to take it forward. There's a lot of things that affect you personally that really takes a lot of strength and energy out of you to take it forward. But I just want to say you're all heroes. You're all doing very, very good. And the Netherlands, we will try to support you, what you do your work, and to bring you all together. Thank you so much. Thank you.